Good evening and welcome to another Voice of Oceanside. Our program tonight is concerning the Desert Shield operation Camp Pendleton is involved in. We have a couple of guests for you. We're going to be talking about the support groups in Camp Pendleton and how it's affected the people around Oceanside and involved in the military. Our guests are Lieutenant Colonel Mike Moran. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tim.
And Major Alice Smith. Let me first ask you a couple of questions to tell the viewers a little bit about what your functions are, and then we'll go into some of the other things that we'll be focusing on the show. Lieutenant Colonel Moran, and I'll probably keep shortening that as time goes on. The function of your particular position, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, is the Director of Joint Public Affairs.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Public Affairs is basically handling the information flow. We're the office that handles all the questions from the media, the press. We're also the office that, in terms of family support, we publish the Camp Pendleton Scout, the base newspaper that, at least these days, contains a lot of information that we hope the families are reading because it's the information they need.
So that your main function is getting that information out to the public on what's happening in Camp Pendleton and the Marine Corps base in particular.
Precisely. What's going on, the services available, the programs available, the events that are being sponsored for the support of the families of those who are deployed. And from our Marines that are over in Saudi Arabia, the journalists who are writing stories, publishing those stories to give our dependents a flavor of what their husbands and fathers are going through.
Okay, before I talk to Alice, or Major Alice Smith, I'll be informal with you. I'd like to just make a few notes to our viewers. Our program will be a little different tonight from the standpoint that we may be taking a call from Colonel John Shotwell, who's in Saudi Arabia. And if we get that call, we'll take it immediately, and he'll tell us a little bit about what's happening currently in this situation and how our military people are being affected. Also, at about 7:30 on our program, we'll be opening the phone lines up so you can call in and ask questions directly on issues that may be important to you about the deployment and or about how you can get services. Major Smith, your function is with the Family Service Center. Can you give us a little idea of what the Family Service Center is and how it functions?
Well, the Family Service Center at Camp Pendleton provides family enrichment programs for our Marines, the sailors, and their families. We have various programs beside the deployment program. We have counseling services, we have information referral, and also employment resources.
Okay, so the Service Center itself is an actual function of the military. And has it been around a long time? Is it something that's relatively new or set up for the Desert Shield operation?
Relatively new in years. 10 years ago, all through the services, they recognized the need for this type of center to be established to assist the families, because whether it was a sailor or a Marine or airman, if that individual wasn't concentrating on his job because he was worrying about his family, then he
wasn't functional quite so well. In other military theaters, such as World War I, II, Korea, and Vietnam, was there a family service center for the families?
Oh, no, nothing like this. Like I said, 10 years ago, and our deployment program is only 5 years old. It was originally created to serve the needs of those units that were in the unit deployment program, a 6-month deployment.
Okay. We're going to talk in particular about some of the functions that your center has and about the deployment program, which has to do with a lot of the people currently. Lieutenant Colonel Moran, let's frame up first how many people are actually normally at Camp Pendleton, how many are gone, and who in particular left, what divisions or what groups of people?
Well, as you might imagine, there aren't too many people left, and when you talk about total numbers, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, 1 MEF, has deployed to Saudi Arabia. That is a big command that has the 1st Marine Division, virtually all of which is gone. There are a few people who remain behind, but virtually the entire division is gone. The 1st Force Service Support Group, the unit that handles logistics, the bullets, beans, and Band-Aids, a large percentage of that unit is gone. And then the Air Wing, the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, some of which was stationed at Camp Pendleton, some helicopter squadrons, that's also gone. What remains behind is the residual elements of those units and those of us who are stationed aboard the base itself, the caretakers, if you will, of Camp Pendleton.
And some of the support groups that would normally be functioning there?
The support groups, meaning the spousal support groups?
Well, no, I'm thinking from the standpoint more of even some of the motor transport, those sorts of organizations.
Yes, the units that are part of Marine Corps base itself, we have to recognize Camp Pendleton is, in effect, its own city. It has everything that the city of Oceanside has. It has a police department, our provost marshal, a fire department. It's a caretaker of large areas that are basically wilderness still. So there's a lot of functions going on that still have to go on at Camp Pendleton, and those Marines are still in place.
Total numbers normally at Camp Pendleton?
39,000.
And how many left?
14,000.
We haven't even talked about the families yet. Before we get into what actually is physically happening with the families and the support of those families and how you as citizens can help them in this time of need, we've got a little different perspective, and this is the first time we've done this on the program. We're going to bring on someone from Saudi Arabia, Colonel Shotwell, who's going to give us a little bit of an idea of what's happening over there. Colonel Shotwell.
Yes.
Now, when I'm talking to you, I've got to let our viewers know also, there's going to be a 3.5-second break in time because of where you're coming from. John, at first I'd like to say hello and congratulations on getting the full bird colonel.
Well, thank you very much, Tim.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is happening over there? And start off with it. I know there's a time difference, what time you're looking at, and what some of the normal functions of our Camp Pendleton Marines are.
All right, well, the time right now is a little after 6 o'clock in the morning. There's an 11-hour time difference. The biggest thing that's going on right now is that our reinforcements, most of which are coming in from the East Coast, are now pouring in here. The people are coming in by aircraft, and much of their equipment and their weapons are coming in by ships. It's a lot like it was back in August with a lot of people and material coming in and getting matched up to go out to the desert. But as you can probably imagine, it's a much more orderly process this time around. We have the benefit of the experience from last summer, and we've had the benefit of a lot more time to prepare for it.
How's the morale of the troops? And can you tell us a little bit about the normal day that they may be going through currently?
Well, the morale is very good. In spite of what you may read in the papers from time to time, there are very few complaints. As you know, it's pretty grueling life. Most of our Marines do spend most of their time out in the desert. It isn't much fun. But I think it's a mistake to try to judge morale by creature comforts. Morale is more a measure of the fighting spirit, and that spirit's very high right now.
Can you tell us a little bit about the normal functions from the standpoint of recreation and entertainment and a little idea of what kind of weather they're facing? Normally a desert climate you'd think is pretty hot.
Well, first of all, the weather's quite pleasant here now, probably comparable to what it is in Southern California. The days get up to maybe at the most now about 80 degrees, and it gets rather cool down the 40s and the 50s at night. Most of our Marines, particularly those with the infantry units, spend about 8 to 10 days out in the desert, and then we bring them back for about 2 to 3 days in what we call the rear area to relax. They get an opportunity to clean up, do their laundry, There is a very nice recreation center that we've currently leased from the Saudis with a couple of Olympic-sized swimming pools, tennis courts, a workout area. We try to get Marines in there at least once every couple of weeks. There's very little interaction with the civilians here. There's no liberty as we think of it back in the States, not an opportunity to go in town and shop and use the restaurants, because where we are, there really isn't much of a town. Overall, it's a pretty grueling life here, but as I say, morale is still very good right now.
Are most of the Camp Pendleton Marines and the support groups, 3rd Marine Division or 1st Marine Division, are they all in the same area, or are you spread out through the country?
Well, no, you think of Camp Pendleton and how large that is, a couple of hundred square miles, and it would be like a postage stamp on the area that we cover now, which is literally thousands of square miles that we're scattered out here in northeastern Saudi Arabia, all the way from, and although I can't go into details on the exact positions, but relatively near the Kuwaiti border, down to some of the coastal and port towns.
Colonel Shotwell, are you receiving any support information or letters or those sorts of things locally from the families and from the community?
Yes, and that's very important to us over here. As one of the small minority of people over here who are Vietnam veterans and recall how little support we got back during that campaign, we're literally getting up to and sometimes more than 100 tons of mail a day here just for Marines. And much of that comes addressed to any service member. We'll get large boxes full of cookies and gifts addressed to any service member who doesn't have a box. And as a result, the Marines feel that the support back in the States is very high. And I think what's important here is that even if the support for our presence here in Saudi Arabia tends to wane as this conflict continues, we hope that the support for the individual service members will continue. I recall from the Vietnam era that much of the antipathy that was directed toward the war wound up being directed toward the warriors, and the service members felt a lot of resistance for having gone over, and I hope we don't run into that this time.
Is there any common thread or message that the servicemen are feeling, or in particular our Marines, I don't want to be so impersonal, that they'd like to let the people back here know about?
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of all the service members here that while we'd much rather be back in the States with our family, we feel what we're doing here now is pretty important. We succeeded in preventing an invasion of Saudi Arabia by Iraq. That's already done. That's history. And we did it without firing a shot. And with the additional forces now coming into the country, we're progressing toward our goal of forcing Iraq out of Kuwait. With any luck and with the grace of God, we'll succeed in that effort without losing a Marine in combat.
A question that's not related directly to our show, but from the attitude of any of the local people, does it seem like we're making some headway in as much as being able to get the Iraqis to pull out of Kuwait?
Well, that's anyone's guess right now. We speculate that it has, simply because Saddam has agreed to let the hostages go and has let many of them leave. That appears to be a positive sign. He's a very shrewd customer, and we're not quite sure what his strategy is, but we're hopeful.
Okay, is there any final messages you'd like to leave with us, Colonel Shotwell?
Well, just on behalf of Lieutenant General Boomer, who's the commander of all the Marine forces in Saudi Arabia, we extend our warmest holiday wishes to our families and our friends in Oceanside.
John, I'd like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come on the program, and I know that you've got many things to do at 6 in the morning. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you from Saudi Arabia. Thank you, John.
Well, Tim, it's a real pleasure talking to you and say hi to all our friends back in Oceanside.
Thank you. That was Colonel John Shotwell, the public affairs officer, I would say to speak, for the Camp Pendleton Marines in Saudi Arabia. Back to where we were coming from, and I'll give us just a little idea. of how the families are affected. We've heard now about the military personnel and some of the things that they're going through. And before we came on the program, Major Smith told me that there are a number of families. How many families are affected with having a spouse, and I'll say spouse because you can help me here, that it's not only men Marines, but it's the WM, the woman Marine, that's out there also?
Yes, they are out there. We went from having in the UDP cycle, the unit deployment cycle, 1,500 families, and that was mainly male Marines, to now we have over 11,000 families.
11,000 families serviced by the center.
Correct. And of course that includes, of that 11,000, that is 54 active duty and reserve units, spouse support groups that have been organized.
Okay, now I want to be able to get a little deeper into this and how this works. First, let's talk about the Family Service Center and its functions, each department or each division or each actual duty that it has. I know the deployment unit, which we'll spend a lot of time on, is just one. What are other things that it does?
Another section within the Family Service Center is the Family Advocacy section, and we have advocacy programs that help with counseling, and this is non-medical counseling. This would be marital counseling. We have a class now that we call Life Coping Skills that is a combination of anger management, stress management, and effective communications. We also handle the issues of domestic violence. Besides family advocacy, I also have the Employment Resources Center. And before, it was mainly the active duty member that was using those services, but now with the active duty member gone, more spouses are coming in.
So from the employment service, was this something to help as they were mustering out of the service, or was this an added job possibly?
Both. We were helping those Marines, service members, that were looking for a second job and also were getting ready to leave the Marine Corps. We had a special program, we have a special program, the VTAP, which stands for the Veteran Transition Assistance Program. It's a 4-day course, and we basically teach them how to write resumes, how to translate what they did in the military into civilian terms. 1 day is spent with just role-playing with potential interviewers, and the last day of the 4 days, we actually have organizations come in and do their pitch.
Okay, so those two functions, the first function being a counseling function for the families and the members, and the second function being essentially a job placement and almost a job training situation and a facilitating situation where they can come in and actually have an opportunity to get employment.
And now that we don't have that many active duty around, we've gone to Headquarters Marine Corps and received permission to turn the VTAP into a training for the wives, because the whole concept in that section is that you just don't want to have the wife get a job. We want to help the wives become career-oriented.
Okay, so, and this is going to be important because there can be other functions where there may not be enough money coming in also. And let's talk about that, because your organization, I understand, also is a, let's say, a go-between, or the organization that helps if there is a spouse that is having problems possibly getting allotment money or needing some temporary financial aid.
Yes.
You interface with other organizations. Can you tell me about that?
We are like the hub. We interface with dispersing on base if the spouse needs to have someone do that for them. Also with the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society for financial assistance. We also work very closely with civilian agencies outside the gate, Salvation Army, the North County Social Services for basic living needs, temporary financial assistance. So.
Okay. But we're going to run to a video in just a second to focus up on how some of the spouses, in this particular case female spouses, are dealing with their situations where they're, in this particular case, men are away from home.
We've, since our husbands have been gone in August, we've had one family day function in October, and then in November we all got together at a pizza joint one night and had pizza and got around together and talked, and we got to watch videotapes of the guys that had been sent from Saudi Arabia. So that was interesting. The more things you do that involve the husbands, the wives are more likely to show up. Like if you're doing something to send to them, we did a banner at our family day, and the men were really excited about that when they received it. And we have a function coming up this weekend on Sunday. We're having a Christmas party, and we're going to have Santa there for the children. And basically we meet about once a month. There's some that would like to meet more often than that, but that's not always possible.
Okay, we've got a Christmas party also this Sunday. We're going to have Santa Claus there, and we're going to have a photographer with Polaroids so we can send different units.
Yes.
And we're going to have a little separate area where we can send messages to our husband on a videotape, and it's going to go to one person in Saudi Arabia so that this person can call the guys in one at a time so they can see their own personal message in private. And I really like that.
Our unit left pretty quickly. They were in Panama for 3.5 weeks, and basically most of the people that came back only got to spend about 5 hours at home, and there was no time given to organize any kind of wife support group before they left. And I just got a roster last week from my husband with a lot of new names that we didn't have. I guess a lot of people aren't aware of who to contact to find out who the unit is or what kind of services are available to them. And so we have come up probably about twice as many wives as we started out with. So we're finding them slowly but surely.
Okay, I'd like everybody to know that you're not alone, and there's lots of places to call. And don't panic. You know, this is all real scary. It's the first for a lot of women, and there are a lot of groups between the base and the outside. Don't hide out. And if you can't think of what to do to solve something, call somebody, anybody.
We started ours with you find out who your chairperson is first. It's usually the CO's wife. CO's wife, and they're contacted by Family Services Center, and you're given a booklet from Family Services Center that explains your duties and the things that you can do to organize your group. And then they have a key wives meeting after that to train the wives on what they can do and how to refer people that need help, so they're not taking the problems on themselves. They're just directing them to who they need to go to.
Major Smith, was there anything that the ladies missed in that particular video that we should add to the program?
No, they didn't miss anything. The one thing I'd like to reemphasize is that the only silly question is the one you don't ask, so please call us.
You are actually looking for business. You want to bring those people in and facilitate solving some of the problems.
Oh, yes. Up at 29 Palms, apparently they had a chapel up there. They were marrying people at the cyclic rate, and we know there are still wives out there, even here in Oceanside, that got married and the husband took off, and they don't know. So we're reaching out and say, call us.
Now this is a good question, and to move a little from it, a lot of the Marines that have enlisted in a very short time, that have just come out of, say for example, boot camp or the equivalent of, and they've been married relatively early before they were deployed, they're in a situation to where not only are they gone and we're looking at trying to get their incomes and the spouse set up in this particular case, but is there an average age of some of those young wives?
18.
So it's a tough situation. Not only are they not in their current home, so to speak, they may be in a different state,
Correct.
but their newly married spouse is gone, and they may not know how to get to the Family Services Center.
Exactly, and the new husband probably doesn't know what all we offer because he was a single Marine.
And he didn't care much at the
That's
time.
right, that's right.
Okay. There are other areas of the Family Service Center that we should address, and then we'll go into deployment. The information function.
Referral specialist. My information referral specialist has a comprehensive data bank of referral resources, again, to those agencies on base, off base, civilian and military.
Okay, now those referral services, are they primarily social services like Navy Relief?
Oh, they could be. They could be everything from something to do with your pet, animal control, to immigration.
Okay, so everything, that whole wide spectrum that you work with.
A to Z.
Now, a lot of the functions, and speaking of the social type functions, The Armed Services Y, for example, which I'm sure you interface with, has their duty changed now that so many of the single military personnel aren't here?
Yes, they have. Where it used to be focused more on that single Marine or sailor, now they have changed their mission to bring in the families. So they're more family-oriented.
Okay, let's talk about the function that we brought you here tonight for, your deployment program. Is there a wide area that you're trying to service there? And I know that the support groups will address also. Tell us about that.
Well, the deployment program, as I said earlier, is relatively young, 5 years, and it was created to serve the needs of the families of those Marines who were in the unit deployment program, going from, as I said earlier, 1,500 families approximately to now over 11,000 families. We help the support groups for the units organize, and we assist them in their functions, their social functions, and of course if an individual wife or husband now, as the case may be, because we do have those female women Marine out there with the house husbands, we help them interface with dispersing if there's a pay problem, again, if there's some kind of financial assistance needed, adoption, anything that could come up, we assist those families.
Okay.
We are also a friendly ear. Because I have women on my staff who are married to Marines. The Marines have been deployed 6 months or been to Okinawa that have been through it.
I understand that you have someone on your staff that's engaged to a Marine in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yes, yes.
You yourself are,
Yes.
could have been one of those brides that you mentioned at 29 Palms.
Oh, yeah.
To just divert for just a second, and I'll run back to that program, I wanted to ask Lieutenant Colonel Moran, there's a couple of different areas that you focus in a social situation, and there's been a number of gifts that have come to Camp Pendleton for our particular Marines. How do you handle when someone wants to give something to the military personnel overseas?
There's basically two ways that someone can get a gift over to a Marine or a service person in Saudi Arabia. One is using the U.S. mail. If you know an individual or you know a given unit that you would like to send gifts to, that's perfectly appropriate and acceptable. For some of the larger contributors, shall we say, some of the businesses that would like to get together and give bulk gifts of something, the Defense Department has directed that the Defense Logistics Agency will be the entity that receives that and sends it over to Saudi Arabia.
Are you getting opportunities for large gifts?
Yes, we do. We're contacted, probably 3 or 4 times a week by people with large gifts to give, and we direct them to this DLA office. And the rationale behind it is that units that come from Camp Pendleton sitting between San Diego and Los Angeles have a lot of people who want to contribute. Some of the other units, particularly some of the Army units that may have come from bases that were in less populated areas, they might be over in Saudi Arabia, and with only a very small town outside their base, there wouldn't be a large base of people to send gifts over. So you could have an instance where an Army unit relatively near a Marine unit would be getting nothing, whereas the Marine unit would be getting a lot of gifts. The Defense Department for Equity has said large gifts and donations have to be funneled through an agency that will be a fair broker to all.
You could probably understand where Marines could get more than Army just because of the status, I'm sure.
Well, we would expect so.
Okay. I'm just playing with you a little there. Our phone lines are open, and if you'd like to call in, please call in and ask questions. We do have a call now, and we'll take those as they come. Welcome to the Voice of Oceanside. Can you please state your name and your questions for our guest?
My name is Terry. I was just wondering if you could please give the address where we can write someone in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Terry, hold on the line, and we'll try to, can we give that to her, or do we have to wait?
Well, Terry, if you could call me at 725-5361 tomorrow, we have addresses that you can send to any Marine on ship or on land. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and thank you.
Okay, Terry, you want to repeat that number again for us so we make sure other viewers may have caught it?
725-5361.
5361. And Terry, is there anything else, any other questions you may have?
No, sir.
Are you using the Family Service Center now?
No, but I've only been out here a month, so I haven't quite gotten that far yet, but I plan on going this week.
Terry, where are you from? We can tell that drawl.
Georgia.
We thought so. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
And that's a situation that you mentioned, is a lady like Terry in particular is in a situation, she's only been here a couple of months. Now, there has been deployment of other than just our active duty Marine. There's been other organizations come in. I'll take one call, and I want to talk about reserves. Welcome to the Voice of Oceanside. Can you please state your question for our guest and your name?
Yes, I'd like to know how big your packages can be to send to the men in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, what's your name?
Suzanne?
Oh, Suzanne?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have a spouse or friend in Saudi Arabia?
My brother-in-law and
A
husband.
brother-in-law. Okay, size of packages.
Suzanne, again, the regulations have changed, so if you would call the Family Service Center, we can give you the latest information on the postal regs for what size the box is, exactly what you can send. I can tell you right now, you can't send alcohol, tobacco, anything that's considered pornographic, and even for the Saudis, that might be a picture of you with a swimsuit on. But call us tomorrow and we can give you the latest scoop on the box size, etc.
Okay, Suzanne, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's another situation. Socially, do they actually, when the packages are sent to, do the Saudi Arabian government, do they have an opportunity to actually censor what comes through, or do we do that ourselves?
There's been some real horror stories, but they're not all true. They do not open every package that goes over. They do, a random search.
So we have to make sure that when we send things, we don't want to offend their culture.
Correct, and they have that right. It is their country that the packages and mail are going into. But I've heard some stories where people say that, they'd heard that every box, well, there's just no way every box can be opened.
No, that would be, especially, I think John Shotwell told us that there was, how many pounds a day? There was
100 tons.
100 tons a day. Now, I wanted to go into the actual reserve function. Not only are active duty Marines being sent through, and in this lady, Terry's particular case, she may have been a situation to where her husband had gone through basic training at MCRD since Desert Shield had started, been shipped to California, had no idea of what was happening with Camp Pendleton, and now she's a new person. Reserves. Are there many active duty reserves serving in Camp Pendleton? And are there any from Camp Pendleton being shipped to Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Camp Pendleton is one of the two major sites of that reserve units that are called up report to. It's Camp Lejeune on the East Coast, and of course on the West Coast, we're the one point that they come to. Reserve units are brought in, their records are reviewed, they get a medical exam, and they're processed. They have a host unit that they join. That's a regular unit. Some reserve units have departed for Saudi Arabia. When the 5th MEB, or Marine Expeditionary Brigade, that sailed about 2 weeks ago out of San Diego, when they left, they had a fair number of reserve units that had been joined to it to flesh it out, so to speak. Reserve units are still coming in. Some are still at Camp Pendleton awaiting to join their regular host units, but it's an ongoing process.
So there's a number, and even the management staff at Camp Pendleton is somewhat reserved.
Yes, I'm one of them. A number of reservists have been activated to flesh out the units that are involved in processing other reserve units through.
So this has not only affected the active duty Marine, and you may have this situation too, that we have a reserve Marine family that would be eligible for family services?
Of course. In fact, this last Saturday, we briefed the 4th LAI Battalion. And there were a lot of moms and dads, girlfriends, fiancés, besides the actual wives and husbands that came to our brief. But yes, active duty reserve, retired, we take everyone. We're here to help.
Okay, we've got one more caller. Welcome to the Voice of Oceanside. Can you please state your name and your question for our guest?
Yes, this is Evelyn Steiner, and I do have a question that I would like to bring up. It's about the filing of our income tax for next year. And I would like to know whether we do have a service for our service members and also dependents that were left that doesn't know how to prepare our income taxes like myself.
Evelyn, have you contacted Family Services yourself, it sounds like?
I sure will.
Okay, now hold on the line and we'll address that. Now this is a situation that people may not have thought about. With the spouse in particular being the male, maybe the one that has handled the income taxes for a number of years,
We've found a lot of the families where it has been the head of the household, the man, has done the budget, the bills, the taxes. Evelyn, we do have a service through Joint Legal Assistance. They have what they call VITA. They will train volunteers to help the families do the taxes. And over in Saudi Arabia, they have the same service for the active duty members. So we're getting it both ends.
Okay, Evelyn, is that, you kind of told us what we needed to know. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes. How about signatures? Do we have to send our income tax return to our husbands? Or do I have to go to legal and show my documentation? Yes, I can force my husband's last name.
Evelyn, don't give us your last name any longer when you're fortunate.
It's like my fiance, Evelyn. He said, do the taxes and sign them, but if they're wrong, I'm going to kill you. I believe that question you need to address to the lawyers over at Joint Legal Assistance. You should be able, with a power of attorney, to sign your husband's name and then put POA by it, but you need to talk to the lawyers, and we can hook you up with the lawyers.
Okay, I sure will do that.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Thank you.
And it's nice to get this kind of feedback, because there's going to be a number of things that you may not have thought about, or particularly the families hadn't thought about, from registration of vehicles to taking care of tax situations that they hadn't been addressed with. And you have counselors on staff that can deal with that.
We do, yes.
Okay. Family support units. We haven't had an opportunity to talk about those yet, and I don't want to run out of time before we do. Tell us a little bit about how the support unit works and what they're made up of. You mentioned that they're connected to particular units or divisions?
Units. The actual unit will organize their own spouse support group. And of course, one of the things that's been so different about this deployment is the fact that in a normal deployment cycle, we would have 10 units that would actually be deployed, have 10 units in workup, and they would have 6 months to get prepared. And the head of the household do the things like wills, power of attorneys, do whatever had to be done to get the family ready for the warrior to be expeditionary. During this deployment cycle, which was basically 6 through 24 August, we had units that literally left overnight. The families possibly didn't get to see them for more than 5 hours. So these units have had to mature very quickly. The units are organized around usually the chairperson being the CO or the XO's wife. And then we have the key spouses. And what they form up is a telephone tree to pass information up and down. And also the key spouses assist the chairperson in the events that the support group have.
Okay, so the support group is not only a situation where they talk back and forth possibly about problems, but they also help facilitate where to get information, how to get information, such as the tax question that we just had.
We conduct every month a chairperson's meeting, which we bring in speakers based on what they say they need, and also speakers that we think they might like to hear. We do ongoing key spouse training also for units to bring people up to speed who have never been key spouses, or to do refresher for folks who have been key spouses before on other deployments.
Is there a reason for keeping the unit, so to speak, together with the chairwoman, or chairperson, I should say, and the key spouse?
Yes, because you want to keep your unit integrity, because usually the wives and husbands know each other, they live near each other, and it's just easier if they follow the unit.
Have something in common in particular to talk about. Speaking about that, now you may have individuals who, for one reason or another, maybe in the Navy capacity, that live in our adjoining areas, in our communities that are surrounding Camp Pendleton, and their spouses may have been out of North Island or out of Miramar. Can they use the Family Service Center, and is there any functions for them?
Oh, yes. It doesn't matter. In fact, it would be silly to drive 35 miles to go to the Navy Family Service Center or the Recruit Depot Family Service Center for something that you could get in 5 or 10 minutes at my service center. And we all work that way. Even the Air Force, March, Castle, they have families Marine families who have come in there. They call us, we research it, we call them back. So yes, they can go anywhere.
During the holiday season, there's a number of different holidays that are coming up, and there may be many, many holidays past before the Desert Shield operation is taken care of. What happens on those particular days?
Well, for the holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, the support groups were having Thanksgiving parties and also Christmas parties. We facilitate the support groups. We give them ideas of what they might want to do, projects such as get together and do a banner to send to the group, the unit. We give them ideas. They've been pretty active during the holiday season, coming with little parties and dinners and things for the kids to do, like videotaping to send out to Dad.
Is that done quite often when videotapes are sent?
Yes.
It beats the old letters
Oh,
that you
yeah.
can't see people with.
Yeah, and we also reproduce newsletters for the support groups that go out to the individual family members, and then the units themselves will send us what we call a unit familygram. We reproduce it. It has news from the men on the crews in the unit, and that goes to the family members too.
Okay. There was a family day, or a couple of them, I think, at Camp Pendleton. Does that have anything to do with your service center? And what happened in the family day?
Well, there were two family days, one on the 8th of September and one on the 8th of December. And of course, Lieutenant Colonel Moran organized the first one, and it was just not for the deployed families, it was for all the Camp Pendleton installation. And I use that to encompass not only the division, but the base and FSSG and the wing, but take care of all families. And we had service agencies that could do things. For example, PMO was out and they could do ID cards and fingerprinting of children. My center was out. We passed out information. You name it. If there was a service that could be had out there, we did it.
Colonel Moran, along those same lines, your function not only in getting information out with the scout and dealing with the media and interfacing, it has some responsibilities back and to try and get information out to the families, I would assume. You're going to be faced with having to compete with the newspapers and maybe some I can't even say it, in the type of information that is coming out to the families and their worries about what could possibly happen to their loved ones overseas. Do you have to deal with that on a regular basis?
Yes, we do. First of all, within the Scout, we have a whole page devoted to home front news. All the services, many of the services that Major Smith has are listed there on a weekly basis. We also we run in the Scout on a regular basis stories written by Marine journalists over in Saudi Arabia. And because they're living with the units, they're part of the units, we think they give a special flavor to what life is really like over there. We know those are of keen interest to the dependents that read the Scout. We also field a lot of questions from the media. As you can imagine, because we're the rear area of the troops that are deployed, the media comes to us with a lot of questions. So a lot of what you see in the newspaper and on television about Marines or about Marine Corps activities here in Camp Pendleton and sometimes in Saudi Arabia comes from our shop.
Sensationalized. I had to make sure that I could say it. I'm sorry.
Personnel Services, which is my next higher department, Assistant Chief Staff Personnel Services, we also produce a home front news letter that we leave everywhere. We take out in town, we leave it like at the PX, commissary, SATO, the phone, you name it, we drop off copies of this. We also mail that out to the Marines in Saudi to let them know what we're doing for the families, because that's very important that they know that if the wife doesn't, they see this and they can write the wife and say, hey, go to the Family Service Center, they're doing taxes, or hey, go to the Family Service Center, they can help you get the car registered, or whatever it is. So we send that information out to them to let them know what services are available.
Now, are the chaplains involved in providing some services also on an annual basis? I know they've had normally things to do during the holiday seasons.
They do. Our base chaplains are running food drives. They do food baskets, and they do that at Thanksgiving, also at Christmas time.
Are those food baskets primarily for the families?
Yes.
Okay, that's not something that's going to be shipped out at all.
No,
it's just
no.
something right locally here. Something that's going to be, I'm sure all the viewers are going to be interested in, is there something needed from our community to help support you at not only Camp Pendleton, at Family Services, in dealing with the families? Is there something that can be done? Volunteerism, so to speak.
Oh, yes, sir. I could use volunteers to come into my center to help with answering the phones, putting deployment packages together, doing clerical work, and also if there's clinical psychologists or MFCCs that might like to volunteer some counseling time for general support groups.
Can you tell me what an MFCC is?
Marriage, family, child counselor.
Okay. So with this change from roughly 1,700 families that you were servicing on a regular basis to now 11,000, there's no possible way that the staff could handle that.
No, there's only 3 deployment coordinators, 4 Marines, and 6 other GS civilian employees.
Okay, I've got to ask Lieutenant Colonel Moran this statement. Over many, many years, and it appears that it's changing now, the philosophy has, and you can finish the statement for me, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a...
It used to be if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, the Marine Corps would have issued you one. Today, that has changed dramatically, I think, as Major Smith has outlined very well. And the reason is very simple. If a Marine is overseas and is worried about his wife or his children and their welfare, then his main focus is not on doing his job. If his main focus is not on doing his job, we don't have a Marine full-time out there, 110%. We've come to realize that if you take care of the Marine's family back here at home, you'll have a much better Marine over there deployed in Saudi Arabia or on the floats that we have Marines on all the time.
Plus the fact they will want to stay in the Marine Corps instead of getting out after initial enlistment.
I can just have a small portion of that. I was just recently gone for about a week, and my 2 young children were upset that I was leaving for that long, and probably when they get older, they'll probably be happy that I leave for that long. But in coming back, that was a lot of my thought, and I wanted to come back and see my children and that sort of thing. And when you're talking about an indefinite amount of time, it's got to be extremely difficult from a counseling standpoint. The other thing that I've noticed on a few programs is there's many Marines that have got kids in high school that they're missing things like football games, and those things can never be taken back again.
In fact, on the base, most of the coaches for soccer were Marines, and so when they left, the soccer seasons looked like it was going to die, and so they brought wives in and taught them how to referee soccer.
So we kind of make do with what we have to in that particular case. You mentioned volunteers and becoming involved and how to get involved. Call the Family Service Center number,
Yes.
725
5361.
5361. You can always remember the 725. It's all the base numbers. But 5361 is the number.
Yes.
And if you'd like to get as many volunteers as you possibly can, even year-round, to help you in that capacity. Before we let you go, is there anything we've missed here that we could add? We've covered you pretty good. We're going to sign off in a minute, and before we do, I'd like to thank our guests, but I'd also like to let our viewers know. As we sign off, we've got a few minutes of videotape rolling in on a song that was produced in particular for the Desert Shield, and we'd like you to hang around and listen to that if you possibly would. I'd like to thank Lieutenant Colonel Moran for coming on.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And Major Smith. Again, and let our viewers know of anybody that is coming into the military or coming in that has been transferred in either reserve, retired, or active duty. The Family Service Center is there to help them during this time of need, and hopefully, if we have any luck whatsoever, we'll have them back. So maybe we'll get your job less and less as time goes on. Thank you both for coming on, and please watch us next time on The Voice of Oceanside.
Hi, my name is Gordon Hastings. I wrote the lyrics to Beautiful Yellow Ribbons. Tamaris wrote the music and is singing it, and it was designed especially for the service members in Operation Desert Shield and their families. It's dedicated to them. And we sent one to Operation Desert Shield, and we got a pen pal back, a Marine, that said, "I especially like mention of your yellow ribbons in your song. I will never forget those ribbons, the lining of flags on Main Street, and the children waving as we departed Cherry Point. It sent those wonderful warm chills up your spine."
Winds of war are blowing and my love was called. House it is empty, like all life was stalled. Mothers, friends, and lovers tying ribbons on the trees. Oh, beautiful yellow ribbons blowing in the breeze. The flowers still bloom, but they're not the breathe.